Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Whole, What Teachers Need to Help Students Thrive, by Rex Miller, Bill Latham, Kevin Baird, and Michelle Kinder. Narrated by Stephen R. Thorne. Foreword. Many books have been written about how and why the industrial model of education fell out of step with the times. These books explain why education now kills creativity and creates growing inequities in the system. But Whole is the first book to examine the psychological damage to teachers and students in a system that no longer reflects society's demands upon it. And teachers are caught in the middle. On the one hand, they are expected to achieve higher standardized test scores. At the same time, they must also work with kids who are emotionally not ready to learn. Yet, many school leaders just hope teachers and students will just somehow grit it through, that teachers will just figure out how to get kids to grade. That is a recipe for teacher burnout. It will assure more students get left behind. Schools that remain there will not achieve the excellence they can and must deliver if America's schools meet the realities of the 21st century. The University of North Texas, Dallas was specifically designed to address those new realities. More than 80% of the students we serve are classified as low income, but the challenges are deeper than economic. More are students of color, living in vulnerable neighborhoods, and characterized as under-resourced. Many are learning English as a second language. Children who live in these communities experience some of the most turbulent, volatile, and traumatic experiences in life. That's why schools are becoming the new field hospitals, think MASH, in America. What kind of services and training and support would people need to work in a field hospital? Because Whole digs deep into that question. It gives us a field manual on how to prepare teachers for those conditions. This book tells us how to develop resilient teachers with a new sense of mission. I was able to participate in the unique process that produced Whole, and I believe we all built a bridge enabling your school and community to lift the health and happiness of teachers and students. I believe we live in a golden moment. We can shift the social narrative and priorities, but doing so means that schools need to remobilize around making sure the collective central nervous system of the team of adults in the building is being cared for. After all, these are human beings. They have brains and bodies. Our society must rise to preserve and protect the collective well-being of the humans charged with such a high calling. We must attend to them with urgency, genuine concern, and excellence of care for the whole person. Our future requires that. Dr. John Gasco, Special Advisor to the President of UNT Dallas, Dallas. Foreword. Whatever good things we can build end up building us. Jim Rohn. Every kid is one caring adult away from being a success story. Josh Shipp. Most of us know the pace of technological, social, and cultural change steamrolls many school districts and classrooms. But you may not know teaching has become the fourth most stressful occupation in America. Whole captures the story of a revolution in education as schools respond to these new realities. Bottom line, we must take care of the whole teacher, body, mind, and soul in order to engage the whole student. That requires the courage to reimagine roles, skills, support, and new environments that will adapt to increasing demands. Teaching is tough. Today, more than ever, educators must prepare learners for jobs and technologies that don't yet exist. The speed of change requires teachers to train students for a society that has not even arrived yet. That means educators must have spaces that are flexible, that can adapt to the tsunami racing below the surface toward our shorelines. That means those in my business must design and build the innovative spaces that inspire every stakeholder in the learning process: teachers, students, administrators, parents, legislators, and every member of the larger community. The magic of learning requires meaningful connections between students and adults who care. But too many of today's parents are absent or overwhelmed. While we must try to reach and support them, we must also locate, train, and equip teachers who can step into that gap now. Ship is right. One caring adult can make the difference between failure and success. We all know that. You and I can name the teacher who made that difference for us. That's what makes the whole story so exciting. The book provides examples of teachers and schools that dare to break out of outdated mindsets. But one will also see the critical importance of the right type, size, and quality of learning space. As Rex Miller told us in a previous book, Change Your Space, Change Your Culture, designed space carries the power to build a culture that equips students to move competently and confidently into the rapidly approaching future. Welcoming spaces, open areas for relationship building, vibrant colors, and natural light are some of the elements that cultivate a trusting environment and a positive school atmosphere. Finally, this book addresses the holistic experience for all users. Designers are focusing more intentionally on the design of school spaces and schedules. For example, we know that casual interaction and cross-disciplinary activities improve the learning experience for everyone. Designs that provide designated spaces for reflection and relaxation, loud group activities, and individual quiet work, as well as brain breaks and movement, can alleviate increasing demands and stress levels. Throughout my career with DLR Group, I've had the pleasure of meeting educators from around the world. I'm constantly in awe of their passion for nurturing young minds and for their devotion to the profession. Whole helps the design world to visualize how we can better support those educators and those they teach with space that allows the human spirit to soar. Jim French, DLR Group Senior Principal, Kansas. Part 1. Dying to Teach. Chapter 1. Dying to Teach. It is usually the imagination that is wounded first, rather than the heart, it being much more sensitive. Henry David Thoreau. Education is a habitat for heroes. And what else would we expect? Teaching tackles and fulfills one of the most foundational and primordial purposes of civilization. Teachers prepare children for adulthood and careers. More than that, they preserve the social order. That very milieu attracts those of heroic spirit. That heroic dimension is why teaching provides an exceptional and recurrent focus for books and movies. Each generation of teachers can point to a printed or filmed story of heroes. Up the Down Staircase, Stand and Deliver, Mr. Holland's Opus, Dead Poet Society, Goodbye, Mr. Chips, etc. Each spoke to the hero's heart in millions of boys or girls, sitting in movie theaters or curled up in Dad's reading chair. Our MindShift team also knows those heroes. They cared enough about the story of teachers to join our team. Lynn Fricke, Dan Behrens, Michelle Kinder, David Vroonland, Rachel Huckle, John Gasco, Denise Benavides, and other teachers, active or retired, knew the movies and books, and they knew the 21st century educational machine that chewed teachers carefully and slowly before swallowing them up alive. Another of those teachers, Dr. Marilyn Dennison, was a longtime educator and administrator who specialized in launching new schools. She left education after 2 decades because of the stress. 6 months into her new job with DLR Group, she saw her doctor for her regular checkup. Her doctor had long been concerned about Marilyn's blood pressure. Soon after the checkup, her doctor called. "Marilyn, what are you doing differently?" Assuming a problem, Marilyn started to list several recent minor health issues when the doctor said, "No, that's not what I'm calling about. It's your blood work. You have no stress markers at all. What changed?" Marilyn told her the only thing that had changed was that she quit teaching and accepted a job she loved and a place where she was appreciated. Through subsequent conversations with her doctor, Marilyn clearly saw she had been dying to teach. Who cares? The course of our work all over the country very naturally brought us into continuous interaction with the teachers on our team. As our work moved into stories of teacher and student trauma, as we talked to courageous and selfless educators and walked through broken neighborhoods, we often saw our teachers suddenly look away, shake their heads, and wipe their eyes. Sometimes it was like walking through old battlefields with the retired servicemen and women who once had fought there. In time, we all began to realize how much those old soldiers and sailors still care about those who remain in battle mode. Despite their own PTSD, some part of them wished they could return to the front. Yet even as we were surrounded with those genuinely intrepid teachers, we began encountering Gallup's reports that 70% of teachers have checked out and 20% are so indifferent that they poison the atmosphere. In fact, teacher disengagement sits at the center of the debate over school performance. So, there we were, working with teachers of generational, geographic, ethnic, and political diversity, but they all cared. Every one of them, deeply. And Gallup says 70% of teachers have disengaged? What was going on? The next jump. In January 2018, I attended a 3-day leadership academy in New York City sponsored by Next Jump, the e-commerce company. As part of their passion for supporting educators, Next Jump's academy offered their unconventional philosophy, tools, and practices to teachers. Next Jump's unorthodox approach grows out of their own unique history. After early success, they plunged to near bankruptcy during the dot-com crash. After surviving, Next Jump shifted its business platform from marketing to technology. That launched a period of rapid growth, an evolution that stripped away the culture which the founders built and cherished. As Charlie Kim, the driving founder, explained to our class, "We found ourselves with a small army of brilliant jerks." So, one Friday afternoon, Charlie and Megan Messenger, another founder, fired 50% of their programmers. They started over, establishing the right culture and character, and then rebuilt the business on that new platform. Next Jump now employs around 250 people, and those people generate $2.5 billion in annual revenue. That is $10 million of revenue per employee. To put this in perspective, Google makes about $1.63 million and Walmart about $230,000 per employee. Next Jump is clearly a cult, in the best sense of the word, cult, as the root for culture. The 3-day academy felt like a group of Little League baseball players showing up at Yankee Stadium for a day of training and workouts. It was a day of 90-mile-an-hour fastballs, magical curveballs, a lot of grins, and shaking our heads in awe of what we saw and did. The Next Jumpers were confident, transparent, genuine, and generous. We watched young employees, just a few years out of college, quietly manifesting the poise and presence of seasoned executive leaders. That is part of their mystique and magic. Their transparency and willingness to go off script showed up the morning of our last day. Of course, that very genuine integrity and flexibility were a jolt to the group. But the whole Next Jump experience was an earthquake to my paradigm regarding employee and teacher engagement. I just got a view of everything I can't do. Charlie Kim kicked off the Academy's final day by telling us, "The safest thing we can do is to follow our agenda. You'll have a great day, and at the end, we'll shower you with books and gifts, food, and a great send-off." But we think we might have screwed up the whole thing. We may have lost sight of the primary reason we held this academy. It is for educators, not for the VIP guests observing. You are very good people doing good work, but you are resource-starved, time-starved. I feel like we showcased our healthy food, exercise, and things you cannot imagine. We plopped you into how we run. That's why our team stepped back last night and asked, are we actually helping them? Is today going to end where you educators walk away saying, Okay, that's cool, but I just got a view of everything I can't do. That's why I reached out to Peter Chiarciaro, our Director of Wellness, to provide a summary of the vitals we took from you yesterday. We take the same vitals with every academy. We've seen it for the CIA, the military, Fortune 500 companies, every group. Let me read Peter's summary. This group's energy efficiency is bad, very bad. It sucks, to be blunt. Of the 20 people, 16 are in a survival state, 4 are in varying states of alarm, and none are thriving. The 4 alarmed ones are very distressed. To have 20% of any group on hyper-on-guard state is a really bad sign. These teachers and educators seem to be in a major fight-or-flight mode. This is a super humble group. The takeaway? This group needs recovery program times 1,000. These educators are the least energy efficient of the groups we've seen. This is backed by blood pressure tests. Then Charlie continued, If that is true, we want to help you. So could you somehow let us know what would help you? Then, as requested, the teachers began to talk. From Jess. My value priorities for my students are to foster nuance and inquiry, slow, deep, and thoughtful learning. But your tools and approach to feedback support a different value than what I'm trying to craft on a day-to-day basis. That's the part I'm struggling with the most. Then Joe spoke. You've been able to build a feedback culture from the bottom up. It works the way you want it to work. But in a heavily routinized school system, where the feedback structure will not change, I am asking how Next Jump's approach can work in my world. I was really fascinated to hear how frankly ad hoc your system is. You can send an email, you can do this, you can do all these other things. In our environment, if someone sends a candid email, alarm bells will go off all the way up the ladder because it has, implications. Hi, I'm Robert. I think we all recognize that schools run a different culture. So there is naturally a lot of resistance to adding anything unless they have a high degree of confidence it will create value. I would be interested in going around the room and letting every person share one idea that you learned in this workshop that you think can realistically be used in your school. I'm starving for ideas to enhance what we're doing. Then Charlie spoke up. The 2 industries we have aligned ourselves with and give most of our company resources to are the military and education. Both recruit very good people in the line of service. But it's like the flight attendant's announcement before takeoff. In case of an emergency, the oxygen masks will drop down. First, place the oxygen mask on yourself and then help others. Humans are wired to serve other humans, which is what you do in education. The same is true for the military. However, you can't help someone else if your cup is empty. But people in education forget to take care of themselves. They forget that when you don't take care of yourself, you can't go far in helping others. Wounded warriors. When Charlie read the group's test results and interpreted the data, shoulders sagged and heads dropped around the room. I heard long and slow exhales. We all saw that survival, just barely getting by, had become the norm. No one could recall what normal felt like. That pried the lid off. We began to hear stories from the front lines. One teacher told us, I used to work in schools designated as turnaround schools, where the culture was very aggressive and chaotic. There was no trust. It was all upstream and taxing. I tried as best I could to build a loving and accepting culture. Now I'm just tired. These schools have an 80% failure rate. Mine was 50%. How can I feel good about that? Most of the teachers were in a constant fight-or-flight mode, the autonomic nervous system's response to perceived danger. The report described the teachers as barely hanging on. When the academy finished, I immediately called Bill Latham. Bill, what if disengagement isn't the problem? What if everyone has been working on the wrong problem for the last several decades? What if the real problem is battle fatigue that looks like disengagement? What if teachers are not disengaged, but over-engaged? What if they care too much? And Bill responded, If that's true, we've built a multi-billion-dollar industry committed to solving the wrong problem. 1,000 invisible betrayals of purpose. The educational industrial complex thought it was grappling with teacher disengagement, but they were wrong. The premise was flawed. So they had leaned their ladder on the wrong wall. It was a good ladder, nothing wrong with it at all, except that it was giving the specialists and their power tools access to the wrong work area. Gallup's 2018 Teacher Well-Being Index reports that 67% of teachers and 80% of administrators work under high stress. These demands interfere with home life for 3/4 of them. The same percentage have experienced a variety of physical and mental symptoms, and 1/4 received a medical diagnosis from their general practitioner. And no schools and districts we saw have plans for tackling the problem. The approaches are reactive, too late, and ineffective. To compound the problem, many teachers feel that raising red flags about stress would hurt their careers. The most common daily manifestations come in the form of insomnia, irritability, tearfulness, difficulty concentrating, forgetfulness, dizziness, and anxiety. This condition has made teaching the 4th most stressful job behind working parents, active military, and police officers. And most teachers are also working parents. In fact, teachers have been absorbing the erosions of their physical energy, mental health, and souls. Dr. Jeff Jernigan, author and counselor, describes burnout as 1,000 invisible betrayals of purpose that go unnoticed until it is too late. All the signs show too many teachers have no buffer remaining. The cartilage is gone. They are bone on bone. And because they are so exhausted and wounded, students with deep needs have no place to go. That condition places education on a collision course between the students who need care and the teachers who have nothing left to give. Wrapping up. Education, by the nature of its call, becomes a gathering place for heroes. They serve society's highest needs and aspirations, preparing children for adulthood and careers. More than that, they preserve the social order. But somewhere, our society got the idea that educators disengaged from that high calling. That judgment resulted from a misdiagnosis. Teachers care too much, not too little. Practical reflections. 1. Think about the times you bought the disengagement story. Did anything about that ring false to you? Do you think exhaustion or battle fatigue might have been a better diagnosis or explanation? 2. If you are a teacher and had been part of the Next Jump Academy, would your vital signs have told the same story? 3. If not, why not? How do you defy the odds? Chapter 2. Schools are killing more than creativity. The student who is fully trained will become like the teacher. Luke, chapter 6, verse 40. A year before my mother passed away, each of her kids received a couple of footlockers of memorabilia. Mom saved everything. When mine arrived, I relived decades of my childhood. Handicraft projects, childhood studio portraits, along with their receipts, and even all the paperwork from my birth, including the receipts. Mom seemed to mark our life events through receipts. Receipts for tennis and music lessons, park passes, 2 accordions, and those I couldn't decipher without a call to my younger sister. Then I hit another sedimentary layer, my report cards. Mom saved every single one, quarter by quarter, from 1st grade through college. My first report cards were from Mrs. Steveau, my 1st grade teacher. Even in 1960, she was doing PBL, project-based learning. Our class raised chickens, studied our nation's space program, and created scrapbooks to chronicle that history. My scrapbook told the story of Enos, the space chimp. Mrs. Steveau made us stand in front of the whole class to present our work. That became my worst nightmare. I was so afraid I would forget the next line of my speech, or worse, just freeze. That fear stayed with me into my adult life. I could not read a speech, but if I thoroughly knew the information, I could talk my way through it. That counterbalance of conversing with a room rather than making a speech later became a strength, one that still serves me in my current work. One line from Mrs. Stavow, written in beautiful cursive on one of my report cards, was like discovering an ancient talisman in the footlocker. She wrote, "Rex has a wonderful imagination and loves to share his stories with the class. I hope he continues, because he has a real gift." I didn't realize that my workaround for sticking to the script was to wrap what little I remembered into stories. Mrs. Stavow represents the deep and permanent influence teachers bring to every class and every student. She understood that superpower, and at least in my case, applied it intentionally and masterfully. In fact, after my first book was published in 2004, she and I resumed the relationship through correspondence. I sent her signed copies of my books, and she replied with handwritten notes of appreciation, encouragement, and affirmation. I was so very fortunate. When I was fully formed, I became my teacher, and I try also to devote a good bit of my professional work to helping others unlock their gifts. Sadly, the opposite is also true. Gallup's engagement surveys tell us only 30% of teachers are functioning with the care and intentional influence of a Mrs. Stavow. About 70% work with some degree of disengagement. But we also know that what might look like disengagement is likely the effects of chronic stress, fatigue, vicarious trauma, secondary trauma, depression, and burnout. We are now learning the mental and physical health of the teacher, along with the school culture, may have a greater effect on learning than the teaching gifts and skills. It is true. Sometimes, tragically, every child who is fully trained will become like the teacher. How does that shape a student's ability to master life's many requirements and opportunities? The learning flywheel. Picture a huge, heavy flywheel, a massive metal disc mounted horizontally on an axle, about 30 feet in diameter, 2 feet thick, and weighing about 5,000 pounds. Now imagine that your task is to get the flywheel rotating on the axle as fast and long as possible. Pushing with great effort, you get the flywheel to inch forward, moving almost imperceptibly at first. Then at some point, breakthrough. Each turn of the flywheel builds upon work done earlier, compounding your investment of effort. 1,000 times faster, then 10,000, then 100,000. The huge, heavy disc flies forward with almost unstoppable momentum. Jim Collins. Bill Latham described my experience with Mrs. Stavow as the learning flywheel. Her care and enthusiasm ignited my curiosity. A teacher who can move a student from boredom or naivete to curiosity will spark questions that set the flywheel in motion. As the momentum builds, the wheel rotates through the increasing speeds of awareness, coherence, discovery, engagement, creativity, and finally into mastery. The flywheel builds motivation and momentum that remain for life. The flywheel moves a student through the stutter steps of social relationships, then moves into the deeper waters of learning, and prepares them for academic rigor, complexity, team-based learning, and the future-ready disciplines needed to graduate into a VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world. I was fortunate. Mrs. Stavow helped me start my flywheel when I was 6. Teachers and students' relationships. Teachers are in the caring business. Caring for others is one of the prime motivating factors directing people into teaching as a profession. That level of care also creates a willingness to sacrifice time, family, and health. But when the needs outstrip the design or capacity of the system, the extra acts of kindness within teaching can become an unhealthy servitude. That is when the reservoir of care dries up, even though the desire remains. Teachers, as humans, then try to refill it with guilt, shame, unhealthy coping behaviors, detachment, and hardness. Today, we mislabel that disengagement. Whether it is caring too much or no longer caring, the consequences for the child are the same: This is why performance psychologist Jim Loehr uses
Sample complete. Ready to continue?